She was the warmth in winter, the gentle hand behind countless math lessons, and the reason neighborhood children stayed an extra 5 minutes outside every evening. In Bay Shore, Suffolk County, New York, Edna Schubert was more than a resident. She was the grandmother everyone wished they had. At 88, she lived quietly in her one-story North Bay Shore home, retired from the Department of Motor Vehicles. She had no children of her own, but the laughter of the neighborhood's little ones filled the gap. She welcomed them into her life, helped with their homework, watched them ride their bikes across her driveway, and treated them like her own. On the morning of the 12th of December, 2003, that warm, familiar light dimmed. A neighbor noticed Edna's front door ajar. The porch light still glowed. A window was shattered. Loose paper scattered across the lawn in the breeze like lost memories. Instinct said something was wrong, something irreparable. Inside, they found her in her bedroom, motionless. She had been beaten to death. The brutality was staggering. A shoe print in a herringbone pattern was visible across her face and neck. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma as the cause of death. Her 93-pound frame had sustained devastating injuries, facial fractures, a fractured sternum and ribs, damage to her thyroid, cartilage, and bone, and a laceration to her collateral artery. It was not just murder. It was vicious, personal, and rage-filled. Detectives arrived quickly. They preserved what they could. Bloodstains, fingerprints, impressions. One print on the window blinds where the perpetrator likely entered was particularly promising, though blurred. But the forensic tools of the early 2000s were not yet refined enough. They had evidence, but no identity. The case, despite their best efforts, went cold. Years passed. Leads dried up. But one man, retired detective Pat Albergo, never let Edna's name fade into silence. Even after leaving the force, he continued thinking about her, about the crime that had haunted their department and devastated a neighborhood. In 2023, Albergo approached the Suffolk County Homicide Section again. He believed that with modern forensic technology, the case could finally be solved. And he was right. Detective Brendan O'Hara joined Albergo in re-examining the case. Alongside them was retired fingerprint expert Timothy Kelly. That once blurry photograph of a latent fingerprint, faintly etched on the blinds, was now revisited with high-definition imaging. Remarkably, by photographing the photograph itself with today's technology, they sharpened the detail. The print was clear enough for a run through modern databases. It matched a man named Raul Ayala. Back in 2003, Ayala had lived just around the corner from Edna, less than 200 yards away. He was 29 at the time, reportedly unemployed, and his prints had entered the system after a DWI arrest. Further examination uncovered another match. His fingerprint was also on a door inside Edna's home, near the broken window. That wasn't just coincidence, that was presence. But fingerprints weren't enough. Investigators needed DNA to seal the case. So, in August 2024, Suffolk County Police traveled to Talmo, Georgia, where Ayala had relocated. Quiet surveillance was conducted. Eventually, he tossed out some items, lottery tickets, plastic bottles, and a Gatorade cap. Detectives collected the trash and sent it in. The results were definitive. DNA on Edna's clothes, unknown for 2 decades, matched Ayala. The sample left behind in 2003, once an anonymous thread, was now a noose. On the 16th of January, 2025, Suffolk County officers, in collaboration with Georgia law enforcement, arrested Raul Ayala. He was extradited to New York and arraigned on the 7th of February, 2025, on 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. During his arraignment in Riverhead Court, a sign language interpreter stood beside him. Ayala, now 51, is deaf and nonverbal. He pleaded not guilty. He was held without bail and now faces life imprisonment without parole. District Attorney Ray Tierney addressed the press. Detective Albergo, amongst many, never stopped thinking about this heinous crime, even after retirement. This indictment demonstrates that justice has no expiration date. Tierney went on to describe how modern high-definition photography allowed them to essentially take a picture of a picture, resulting in a clear print of Ayala's left thumb that matched what was left on Edna's blinds. In court, Edna's family was there. Her niece, eyes brimming, said simply, "We're just glad they found him." Her nephew, stunned by the moment, called the entire experience surreal. After so many years of not knowing, of quiet grief and unanswered questions, the answer had come. And it had come not just through science, but through persistence. For Edna Schubert, who had once filled her days with sidewalk smiles and algebra explanations, there will be no more stolen mornings. But her story now ends not in silence, but with justice. Her name no longer belongs to the cold files of a forgotten crime. It belongs to a promise fulfilled, that no matter how long it takes, those who harm the innocent will be found. She was the neighborhood grandma, and now she is a name forever etched in Suffolk County's legacy.
Mark Anthony Tildesley, born on August 31st, 1976, was a charming 7-year-old English boy whose life took a tragic turn on June 1st, 1984, when he vanished while visiting a fun fair in Wokingham, Berkshire. Despite extensive searches conducted by both local police and British Army personnel, no trace of him was found. Initially, Thames Valley Police speculated that his remains might be interred near Wellington Road, close to the fun fair from which he was taken. However, current beliefs suggest he may have been laid to rest in a shallow grave on desolate farmland. Mark was the youngest child of John and Lavinia Tildesley, with 2 older siblings who had already left their family residence at Rose Court in Wokingham. A student in Year 3 at Palmer C of E Junior School, he was eagerly anticipating the arrival of the Frank Ayres Fun Fair, which graced Carnival Field off Wellington Road 4 times a year. The fair coincided with his school's spring half-term holiday, which began on May 25, 1984. Although Mark was keen to attend, his modest weekly pocket money of 30 pence was insufficient. To supplement his funds, he diligently returned shopping trolleys to Tesco on Denmark Street, collecting the 10 pence deposits left by customers. On that fateful afternoon, Mark encountered a man outside a sweet shop on Denmark Street, who generously offered him a 50 pence coin to purchase some sweets. The man promised to meet him later at the fun fair and offered to treat him to a ride on the Dodgems, Mark's favorite attraction. Shortly after 5:30 p.m., he set off on his bicycle for the half-mile journey to the fair, which was set to open at 6 p.m., assuring his family he would return by 7:30 p.m. Along the way, he crossed paths with 2 friends, but they opted to head home before joining him at the fair later that evening. Tildesley made his way to the fair alone, marking the last occasion his friends would see him alive. He was expected home by 7:30 p.m., but when the clock struck at 8 p.m., his parents, concerned by his absence, ventured to the fairgrounds in search of him. There, they found his bicycle secured to the railings at the entrance. After returning home, Tildesley's mother reported him missing to the authorities at 10 p.m. The Thames Valley Police launched a comprehensive search of the Wokingham area, employing a helicopter and utilizing loudspeakers to appeal for information at the fairground, while also scouring nearby waterways. They even borrowed heat-seeking technology from the Metropolitan Police to assist in locating any potential remains. The day following Tildesley's disappearance, every worker and vendor at the fair was interrogated. Officers meticulously canvassed the 29 streets of Wokingham Town Centre, which housed 960 shops, businesses, and residences. During the weekend of June 9th to 10th, 1984, a formidable team comprising 15 police officers and 2 tracker dogs collaborated with 100 soldiers from the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers Training Battalion based in Arborfield Garrison to comb the southern expanse of Wokingham from Barkham Road to Amon Corner, though their efforts yielded no results. 2 weeks post-disappearance, Detective Superintendent Roger Nicklin lamented that the police remained utterly baffled regarding Mark's fate. In the wake of Tildesley's vanishing, several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen a boy resembling him being forcibly taken from the fairground by a stooping man between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. that fateful evening. Additional sightings were reported in the Langborough Road vicinity. A national poster campaign was initiated, with every police station across the country displaying Tildesley's image, and his disappearance garnered significant attention in both regional and national media. On June 7th, the mysterious vanishing of Tildesley was highlighted during the inaugural episode of the BBC's acclaimed series Crime Watch UK. This initial appeal sparked an impressive response, with 400 calls flooding into the police from concerned citizens. The following day, the police produced their first video reconstruction, featuring a local 7-year-old boy clad in attire reminiscent of Tildesley's. As the first anniversary of Tildesley's disappearance approached, coinciding with the return of the Frank Ayers Fun Fair to Wokingham, a second reconstruction was filmed. This included scenes shot in various locations such as Rose Court, Rose Street, Broad Street, Denmark Street, the Carnival Field, and Loughborough Road. The footage was broadcast at 9:25 p.m. on June 13, 1985, during Crime Watch UK, resulting in an astonishing 1,000 calls, with information one of the highest response rates in the program's history. In total, the police received an overwhelming public reaction, with over 1,200 individuals providing 2,500 potential leads. The investigation was spearheaded by Detective Constable Jeff Gilbert, who had a personal connection to Tildesley through his mother's role at the Wokingham police station. From the outset, the Wokingham police found themselves ill-equipped for such a significant undertaking, with only 4 officers assigned to the case due to staffing shortages caused by the ongoing miners' strike of 1984 to 1985. The cramped quarters of Wokingham Police Station necessitated the use of an attic storeroom as the incident office, while a mobile office was swiftly established at the fairground. Just 2 days post-disappearance, the police resorted to utilizing the Wokingham Baptist Church on Milton Road, adjacent to the police station, as a meeting space. As the investigation expanded over 6 weeks, the Thames Valley Police had to relocate the incident office to Solhampstead, near Reading. Additionally, the police needed to verify that Tildesley was indeed Lavinia Tildesley's son, rather than her sister Christina's child, due to the age differences among the siblings. DC Gilbert was called upon to undertake a task that Tildesley's mother deemed absurd. Initially, Tildesley's brother, Christopher, who had a disagreement with him on the very day he vanished, was the primary suspect, but he was quickly exonerated. On June 7, 1984, coinciding with the inaugural Crime Watch UK appeal, 2 anonymous tips emerged, suggesting that a particular fairground worker might be implicated in Tildesley's disappearance. This individual had been employed at the fair for 11 years and was present on the fateful night. He was apprehended and admitted to abducting Tildesley, claiming he had assaulted and murdered him in his nearby caravan. However, his numerous contradictory statements rendered his confession unreliable, leading detectives to conclude he was not the perpetrator. On August 16, 1984, the Metropolitan Police conducted an interview with another fairground worker, Sidney Cook, at his residence in London. A colleague of Cook had informed the detectives at the Tildesley incident office about his troubling behavior towards young boys in the past. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of the disappearance, Cook asserted that he was working at a fair across from the West Hendon police station in London, a claim corroborated by the fair's owner. Consequently, while Cook remained on record, he was ruled out as a suspect. By October 1984, with the investigation yielding no new leads, Thames Valley Police began to scale back their efforts regarding Tildesley's case. In April 1987, media reports surfaced about potential connections to attempted abductions of young children in the Wokingham area over the preceding 6 months. The police explored whether these incidents could be related to Tildesley's disappearance, but this theory was ultimately dismissed. In 1989, the Metropolitan Police launched Operation Orchid, a comprehensive inquiry into the cases of missing children, spearheaded by Detective Chief Superintendent Roger Tildesley. In December 1990, as part of a significant investigation, authorities conducted an interview with the convicted pedophile Leslie Bailey, who was already implicated in 2 other murders, that of 14-year-old Jason Swift and 6-year-old Barry Lewis, both of which transpired after the mysterious disappearance of Tildesley. Investigators had come into possession of a letter and a hand-drawn map that Bailey had provided to a fellow inmate at HM Prison Wandsworth. This map indicated the location of Tildesley's murder, while the letter, penned by a cellmate, was directed to Cook, a member of the same pedophile ring as Bailey, who was also privy to the details of Tildesley's fate. At this juncture, Bailey, who had a mild learning disability, admitted that Cook's gang, infamously dubbed the Dirty Dozen by the police, had abducted, drugged, tortured, raped, and ultimately murdered Tildesley on the very night he vanished. It was during this revelation that law enforcement connected the stooping man to Cook. On the fateful night of Tildesley's disappearance, Bailey had been solicited by his partner in crime, Lenny Smith, to drive him from Hackney to Wokingham, where a gathering was set to take place in a caravan owned by Cook, situated near a fairground. Upon their arrival, Bailey parked on Langborough Road, and Smith ventured into the funfair to locate Cook. They returned to the vehicle with a young boy, Tildesley, who was reluctant and had to be forcibly lifted into the back seat, despite being lured away from the fairground with the promise of a 50-pence bag of sweets. With Bailey at the wheel and Smith in the front passenger seat, Cook restrained Tildesley in the rear. They subsequently met a 4th accomplice, a relative of Bailey known as Oddbod, at Cook's caravan, nestled in a field called the Moors on Evendens Lane between Finchampstead and Barkham. Cook offered Tildesley a glass of milk laced with a muscle relaxant, of which the boy consumed only half, remarking that it tasted funny. The 4 men then proceeded to assault Tildesley, beginning with Cook and concluding with Smith. After administering additional muscle relaxants directly into the boy's throat, the perpetrators resumed their horrific actions. Smith forced a tablet into Tildesley's mouth and seized him by the throat, as the cycle of abuse dragged on for more than 30 minutes. It was during this time that Bailey realized the boy was no longer alive, although Cook insisted the child was merely unconscious and assured Bailey he would handle the situation. By the time Tildesley's parents discovered he was missing, it is likely he had already passed away. Following the murder, Bailey transported Smith back to Hackney, arriving shortly after midnight. Before parting ways at the marshes, Smith remarked that Cook would manage the disposal of the body. While the police received a judge's commendation for their relentless efforts in solving the case, they publicly acknowledged an unresolved facet. Tildesley's remains had never been recovered, leaving a somber void in the pursuit of closure. In 2007, Thames Valley Police established the dedicated review team to re-examine unsolved murders and serious sexual assaults spanning the past 5 decades, including the tragic case of Tildesley. Despite this renewed effort, no significant breakthroughs emerged. Tildesley is believed to be the first known murder victim of the Dirty Dozen ring. However, in 2015, mounting media and political pressure led to the reopening of an investigation into the 1981 murder of 7-year-old Vishal Mehrotra near East Putney Tube Station in London, with the gang being scrutinized for their potential involvement in this earlier crime. In 2015, Tildesley voiced concerns of a potential cover-up by the Metropolitan Police, arguing there was enough evidence to prosecute Cook for Tildesley's killing. On October 18, 1991, Bailey, along with persons unknown, faced charges for the murder. The trial itself was highly unusual, as the judge explicitly named Cook and Smith as perpetrators, even though they were not formally charged. Equally unprecedented was Bailey's directive to his defense barrister to seek the maximum sentence possible, expressing frustration that Cook and Smith were not also being held accountable. On October 22, 1992, Bailey pleaded guilty to manslaughter and one charge of buggery, receiving 2 life sentences on December 9th of that year. Following the verdict, Tildesley's mother called for the reinstatement of the death penalty, declaring he should have been hanged. Bailey maintained that he did not know the whereabouts of Tildesley's body. Cook, on the other hand, has hinted at knowing the burial location but has refused to disclose it to authorities or the boy's family. Despite Bailey's confession, a police excavation of the moors in March 1991 yielded no findings. Subsequent refusals by police in 1998 to reinterrogate Cook or search a nearby golf course left the family in anguish. In 2012, a fragment of a human skull found near Evendons Lane was determined not to belong to Tildesley. To this day, Tildesley's remains remain undiscovered, making his murder one of Wokingham's most infamous cases. Initial police theories placed his body within a mile of the fairground where he was abducted, but current beliefs suggest he lies in a shallow grave on deserted farmland. In 2019, the family issued a final, desperate plea for Cook, now in his 90s, to reveal the location of the boy's body. Yet no resolution has been found.
For nearly 3 decades, Chitonda Stewart lived with a question that had no answer. Would the person who ended her 75-year-old grandmother's life ever be found? The years dragged on, filled with silence and suspicion, but never justice, until 2025. Now, the answer has finally come. Ernestine Mortimore, known for her warmth, her routines, and her morning sayings, was found dead inside her home on the 1,400 block of West 36th Street in Riviera Beach, Florida, on the 28th of April, 1995. The house sat just south of the Lake Park town border, a quiet neighborhood where news like this felt foreign and impossible. But that morning, something unspeakable had happened. Ernestine had been murdered in what appeared to be a burglary gone wrong. She was found on the floor of her own home, her body bearing the marks of a brutal end, strangulation, and multiple injuries from blunt force trauma. The Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the devastating truth. This had not been an accident. It was violence, it was personal, and it was permanent. The crime scene was chaotic, but not unworkable. Blood samples were taken, and neighbors were interviewed. One of those neighbors was a 27-year-old man named Willie Rogers. But this was 1995. Blood forensics could only tell investigators about types, not unique identities. There was no DNA profile, no smoking gun. Without a confession or solid match, the case stalled. Rogers was let go, the file gathered dust, and a family was left to grieve without answers. In the years that followed, Chitonda Stewart thought about her grandmother often. She remembered the mornings when Ernestine would wake her for school. She remembered the smell of breakfast in the air, the steadiness of her love, and the words she used to say, "The early bird gets the worm." But Ernestine was not a woman who got lucky in the end. Justice moved slowly, if at all, and Chitonda's hope, like the case file, began to grow cold. The decades rolled by. The world changed. But that house on West 36th Street and the story it held never really left her mind. In 2023, nearly 30 years after Ernestine's murder, the Riviera Beach Police Department decided it was time to go back. Cold cases were being re-examined across the country, thanks to advances in forensic technology and pressure from families who refused to let go. This time, a team of detectives approached the evidence differently. They combed through the original material collected in 1995. Old samples, overlooked swabs, fragments of a past tragedy. And they sent those samples to Bode Technology, a forensic lab equipped to do what was once impossible: extract DNA profiles from aging biological evidence. The results came back, and the DNA matched someone who had already been in the case files all along, Willie Rogers. By 2025, Rogers was already behind bars for an unrelated crime. His rap sheet included charges from the 1990s, battery, burglary. He wasn't a stranger to the justice system, but he had never been held accountable for what happened to Ernestine, until now. On the 30th of January, 2025, a grand jury indicted him for first-degree murder. 10 days later, on the 10th of February, Riviera Beach police made it public. Ernestine Mortimore's killer had finally been identified. Detective John McVeigh, who had taken up the reopened investigation, stood at the press conference with resolve in his voice. Mr. Rogers, who was 27 at the time, lived in the neighborhood, and we suspect that it was probably some type of burglary or robbery that went bad, McVeigh said. We had samples from back then that we collected from people in the neighborhood, and Mr. Rogers was one of them. But this wasn't just a lucky hit. The effort to bring Rogers to justice required support, funding, and collaboration. DNA testing is very expensive, McVeigh explained, noting that city officials and the city manager helped secure the financial resources to retest the evidence. The department also benefited from grant funding designated for solving cold cases. For McVeigh and the Riviera Beach Police Department, this wasn't just about catching a suspect. It was about honoring a life lost and proving that justice could still be served, even after 30 years. I feel very successful that we have identified who did this, McVeigh added. When Chitanda Stewart heard the news, a wave of emotion followed. Relief, sorrow, disbelief, all at once. After nearly 30 years of silence, the answer had finally arrived. I just never thought the case would be solved, she said. Even though we deep down inside knew what happened and why, it is a relief. We are happy. She reflected on her grandmother's role in her life. Ernestine wasn't just a caretaker. She was the center of Chitanda's childhood. She helped raise me, she recalled. She used to always tell us the early bird gets the worm. Those words, once just a simple phrase passed from grandmother to granddaughter, now felt like a legacy. Willie Rogers remains in prison, serving time for an unrelated conviction, with an anticipated release date of May 15, 2032. But now, he faces a new charge, the first-degree murder of Ernestine Mortimore. The legal process will move forward, but for Chitanda and her family, some part of the healing has already begun. This case reminds us of what's possible when science, dedication, and heart come together. It proves that cold cases are not lost causes, and that behind every unsolved file is a family waiting for answers. Ernestine Mortimore's story could have ended in silence. Instead, it ended with her name spoken again, not as a victim lost, but as a grandmother remembered. Justice didn't come early, but it came. And sometimes, that's enough.